right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Wednesday, October 12th, 2022, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, September 29th, 2022, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
Move we approve the minutes of Thursday, September 29th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 8. The draft order to reopen notice and request for comment associated with agenda item 9 and docket 2210 CW 109. The draft order to reopen notice and request for comment in docket 3160 ER 109 associated with agenda item 10. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 11, approving Renew Wisconsin's request for intervenor compensation to participate in docket 5 UR 110 in the amount of $10,000 as presented in their supplemental request. Or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 12, approving Renew Wisconsin's request for intervenor compensation to participate in docket 6690 UR 127 in the amount of $10,000 as presented in their supplemental request.
Ready for you?
I'm like, yeah. It's my first meeting. Move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move we approve the notice of proceeding associated with agenda item 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move we approve the order to reopen notice and request for comment in agenda item 2210 CW 109.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Move we approve the order to reopen notice and request for comment in docket 3160 ER 109.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move we approve the application of intervenor compensation filed by Renew in the amount of $10,000 in docket 1 IC 543.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move we approve the application of intervenor compensation filed by Renew Wisconsin in the amount of $10,000 in docket 1 IC 544.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Brings us to agenda item 13, which is docket 5-UI-120. We have 7 remaining order points related to delegations of authority when we opened our order to look at the impacts of COVID. And so we have a memo consisting of 16 pages that walk through these various remaining order points. We have in past meetings discontinued some requirements that came out of this docket. And so these are the remaining issues that we have to decide upon. The first relates to low-income DPA offers. And the discussion about this begins on page 2 of our memo. And the relevant order point that we are considering whether or not to discontinue would require a utility to renegotiate a DPA with a low-income residential customer without limitation. So if we discontinue this order point, then the utility still has the discretion to decide whether or not they'd like to renegotiate, but they would no longer be required to do so. There are also there are a number of utilities across the state that take voluntary actions in addition to required ones, and I think that's an important point. At least that's what I kept reminding myself as I went through this, that while there are requirements in the code that deal with billing and offers of payment arrangements and credit and collection practices, and they have rate schedules and service rules, there also are a number of utilities who voluntarily work with their customers one-on-one, and they take individual circumstances into consideration when they're talking about payment plans. So as a general matter, for all of these remaining order points, I'm at the same alternative. I'm at alternative 1 for all of them. I think that we are at a point, and I think more importantly, given the feedback that we have heard from utilities, both municipal utilities and large investor-owned utilities, that by and large, they have gone back to business as usual. Now that also includes some arrearage management plans that we have seen since COVID. And so I think that it is time to discontinue all of these order points and to get back to business as usual. So, like I said, I'm not going to bury the lead. For all of these, I'm going to be at Alt 1, and I'm going to agree with staff's recommendation or staff's proposal that we can discontinue as of November 1st, 2022. So specific to this one, I would discontinue as of November 1st, the temporary requirement that utilities offer a DPA without limitation. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to bury the lead either. I mean, the pandemic's over. There's no public health emergencies. We're just going back to rules and practices that existed and worked before, and there is no evidence here that it needs to be continued, moreover. There's no evidence that customers are even utilizing some of this. Utilities are operating under their normal conditions. I don't see a need for this to continue anymore. In fact, some of these probably should have stopped a few months ago, but it's time for them to stop now. So I'll be at alternative 1 and all the remaining issue points as well.
Okay, Commissioner Huebner?
I'm pretty sure I'm at Alt 1 on all of them. I think we'll probably go through, I agree with you both. I mean, it is time to move on from the temporary changes, but I guess I would say it's maybe business not as usual or as it was 3 years ago, but as we talked about, there's a lot of arrearage management plans. I think the utilities have added a lot of flexibility and reduced their down payment requirements to be more flexible and work with customers. I hope that continues. Just a recognition too that, COVID is out there. I'm coming off of it myself. The recommendations are still you're home for 5 days. For a lot of low-income folks, if you're working retail, restaurant, you're not working. So we'll talk about the medical side, but just a continued understanding of the flexibility that may be required as, yes, it's time to move past these temporary things, but I think that flexibility, that customer service, the arrearage management plans, those I think should continue, and I hope they do. So on this item, I'm at Alt 1.
Okay. All right, so the next issue is municipal utility DPA rules. So municipal utilities in Wisconsin are not required to offer a DPA for customers who live in rental units. And so this, if we suspend our order point, the municipal utility tariffs would revert, and they would continue to offer or not offer, right? They can do whatever they deem appropriate, but we would be reverting back to their tariffs. So again, I'm at alternative 1.
Yes, I'm same spot.
Commissioner Huebner?
Alternative 1.
Okay, so now we move to medical emergencies. So prior to this, there's been a provision in the code that says if a customer who is at risk of being disconnected, if there's a medical condition in that home that would be exacerbated by the discontinuance of service to that dwelling unit, that the utility puts a 21-day hold on the account, and that prevents disconnection from occurring. We added a clarification that a positive COVID-19 test, as documented by a medical provider, would indeed meet the definition of a medical condition as it appears in the code. And it would, as you noted, Commissioner Huebner, there are still recommendations in place that if you test positive, that you remain quarantined for 5 days, and that certainly does have an impact on people who need to go physically be in their workplace. I think, again, what I've heard and seen is that there has been a shift in terms of flexibility and a willingness to understand that different customers have different situations. And so for that reason, again, I'm comfortable discontinuing this clarification. So I'm at Alt 1.
Yeah, I am too. If you 2 years ago plus when we did this, I was even a little hesitant on adding COVID as a separate category of medical emergency because if you had any sense about you 2 years ago, we knew it was. So, I mean, we were in the pandemic then, so I wasn't sure that we need even to clarify that. And to me, also, the longer if we were to keep something in place like this, it calls into question, I think, our ability to have, it's no longer a temporary measure. We were going over 2 years. And again, because there's no public health emergency, the CDC has lifted all kinds of things. They're now even allowing some hospitals to not require masking if they're in certain areas. So utilities have a lot of tools, and the last thing they want to do is disconnect someone that unless they have to. And obviously, we're also going to bump up against the November 1 moratorium as well. So to me, this is no longer necessary for a variety of reasons, so I'm at alternative 1.
Okay.
Yep, I'm at alternative 1. My comments from before kind of cover this one, so.
Okay. For disconnection plans, we had asked that if the utility had planned to disconnect, that they file their disconnection plan with us at least 5 business days prior to implementing that plan, and that was just a way for us to ensure that we weren't seeing a dramatic spike in disconnections and to just sort of track what was happening. Again, I don't think it's necessary. As Commissioner Nowak indicated, we're bumping up on the November 1st cold weather disconnect moratorium. And so plans for disconnection will be due in the spring. That's when, after April 15th, utilities can go back out and disconnect for non-payment. So I'm at alt 1.
I agree.
Yep, I'm at alternative 1 as well.
Okay. Waiver of credit card convenience fees. This one, we received a lot of requests from the utilities that would allow them to waive their credit card convenience fees to make it easier for customers to submit payment. We still have, and we then subsequently heard from some utilities who asked us to make that a permanent provision within their rules and regs. And so, again, I don't think it's necessary any longer. So, alt 1.
I agree.
Yep, I'm at alt 1.
Okay. And then waivers of certain tariff provisions. This one, we didn't receive any requests for temporary waivers since we issued the order. So, alt 1.
Yep, easy.
Yeah, I'm at alt 1 there too.
And then extension of meter testing deadlines. This one, it appears that most utilities that wished to take advantage of the ability to request a deadline extension did that. They did it back in 2020 and 2021. So, alt 1.
Yes.
Yep, I'm at alt 1 as well on this, thanks. So I guess I did keep you in suspense, didn't I? But ended in the same spot.
But it was
Sorry
a fun
about that.
discussion.
Yes, it was.
Moving docket 5 UI 120, that commission staff issue an order consistent with our discussion today, discontinuing the previous temporary order points.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, agenda item 14, docket 5-FE-104. Commissioner Huebner is leading this discussion.
All right, thank you, Chair. So we are in phase 3 of our 4th quadrennial planning process, and we have, I count 5 decision items here today for ourselves. I thought the staff memo that was provided to the public was really, really good. I thought the summary, attachment A, was really helpful of all the decisions that had been made prior to this. I did look back at that, and I thought that that was great. In addition to all of the comments that had come in phase 1 and phase 2, we did have 4 commenters who made it all the way through and commented again on phase 3. So extra points to those 4. The first item that we're going to discuss today, we have 2 items up front before we talk about the goals themselves, and those are related. The first one is the low and moderate income and whether to set a specific key performance indicator or KPI for this. I thought the discussion was good and the comments were also helpful on this. I thought alternative 1 was the most reasonable, and that would set a KPI to to increase the number of applications received in Tier 2 income qualified programs by 6% over the baseline. I thought that was more appropriate than alternative 3, the overall spending, and we could talk about that if either of you support alternative 3. It just sounded like from the memo that we're not really sure on the exact spending, because some of the spending bleeds over from various programs, that a spending KPI to me made less sense than just a focused effort to get more applications in the door. I thought 6% was, it's more, but it's reasonable, I think, achievable. So on this, I was at alternative 1. Chair?
I agree. I was at the same spot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with part of this endeavor because we're still trying to figure out who is the underserved. So I struggle with setting a goal for something that we don't yet know who the target how that target audience is going to look like. It's kind of putting the end part first without knowing all the data. And they're out doing that data because, we still are trying to figure out who is underserved and why. So it seems weird to me that you set a goal for something that you haven't yet defined yet. But, so.
Okay.
I struggle with that. And I also did in the memo, on the Tier 2, because if it is just the Tier 2, that group of customers, why are they not participating? And, one of the things I asked to was in the memo, it talks about how they get about 1,600 qualified applications and about 1,300 actually get an incentive payment. And I asked, how does that compare to other groups in focus? And participation rate and incentives is a little lower than others. So, that would then lend to, well, we should try to increase the dollar amount, right? Because we're getting people to apply, but then they're not doing the full follow-through. But there might be a whole variety of other reasons completely outside of our control.
Right.
And then we can't, there's only so much that this program's going to do. But I go back to, maybe we should just create the more awareness of it, and that's getting allow the number of people familiar with the program, and how are we doing that? So it's a long way of saying I agree with you guys.
Oh, okay.
But,
All right.
God, you sound really,
He's surprised.
yeah, jeez. Didn't mean to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, right.
But I still struggle with it.
Yeah, okay.
Because we're still trying to figure out the exact target audience.
Okay.
So how are we setting a goal on a target audience that the program administrator is admittedly still working on?
Yeah.
So I think this also will impact, it could impact the amount of incentives being paid out, right? Because you may have more money spent on getting those applications and awareness to people versus the incentive. So I worry a little bit about that, but you have to spend money in order to reach them.
Right.
I get that. And
Yeah.
we can talk about that later when we talk about the gross savings goals too.
Yeah.
But, so I'll join you, but,
Okay.
I guess with an asterisk.
Yeah, and I talked to staff a little bit about this too with KPIs, and like Clean Wisconsin recommended more of what I'll call outcome or
Yeah.
a certain amount of lifetime savings for this
Right.
group.
Right.
And, I've wrestled with this a little bit over the phases, because generally speaking, I like more of the outcome-based, but then can Aptum control that, right?
Right.
And there's only a finite amount of money, and so
Yeah.
if you're gonna have to spend more to get that outcome, then there's less money somewhere else. So I kind of came around to the idea of getting more in the door of the application, so be that as it may. So we're all at alt 1 there, okay. So moving on to page 18 of the memo, the next decision item is a key performance indicator for rural spending. And what we decided in phase 2 was basically to, spend appropriately with the number or the percentage of rural customers. That's what we directed. So that would be alternative 1 here, and that's where I am at. And doing that for the first 2 years, that may be foreshadows that I'll be supportive of the mid-quad review later as well. But I think that this is appropriate. I think that this accomplishes the goals we set out in Quad 3. It gets spending incentives proportional with the number of rural customers we have in the state, and continuing that effort that was successful in the last quad. So I'm at Alt 1.
So, can I just ask, Commissioner Hebner, you're at Alt 1 instead of Alt 2 because, I'm going to jump ahead now.
Yeah.
You just foreshadowed that you're going to,
Yeah.
that you would like a mid-quad review.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think staff was pretty supportive of that, and I know that one of the things that we talked about in Phase 2 was, rural versus underserved, and is there a difference, or, how much overlap is there? I know they're going to do some research on that. It may come back with the LMI, as we just talked about, low and moderate income is just a more comprehensive underserved. So that's why I was at Alt 1, is sort of continuing the rural, as the KPI to achieve in 2023 and 2024. We know they're going to do a little bit of work on how rural and underserved overlap, or if there's different, specialized things that need to reach different customers, and then that mid-quad review might set up tweaks for the last 2 years of the quad. That's the way I was kind of thinking of it.
Okay,
So,
okay, all right. I can join you at Alt 1.
okay.
Yeah, I'm at Alt 1 too, but not because and I'll be different probably at the other part. I think you can be at Alt 1 without requiring something to come back, because
Yeah.
that just it's going to happen no matter
Yeah.
the kind of part, like, we're just saying it out loud, right?
Yeah.
So, but they are doing some research now that may inform us to take a slightly different tack in a couple of years. So I think that we should do it for the first 2 years. So I'm alternative 1.
Okay. Okay, the next decision item is on page 30, and this is what the focus on energy savings goals will be for the next quad. Staff did, I thought, a really good job, and they did make available to me, I don't know if they sent it to you both too, they had a list of, what the potential study said, and then all the pluses and minuses that they had adjusted, which were talked about, at length in this memo. I think that every adjustment that they made makes sense. The goals are lower, but the avoided costs that they're using are lower as well. I talked to the team a little about, okay, well, right now, energy prices are really high, both natural gas and electric, and we've seen that in the fuel reconciliations. And so, but the reality is, Focus uses these forecasts, and they use kind of rolling averages, and they don't jump up when the energy prices go up, and they don't jump down. It levels and smooths. And so, to me, I felt we were left with what we're left with. The potential study was robust. It says what it says. I thought the adjustments that they made all made sense, and so that left me at alternative 1, which is, approving the goals as is written here in Table 6. So,
I agree.
Chair?
I was also at Alt 1.
okay. Commissioner Noack?
Yeah, so we don't really have a different alternative, like, we have the numbers presented, and I get that how they shook out. Some stuff we had to increase, some decrease after
Yeah.
the potential study and changes in the markets, and it all shakes out where the administrator is projecting in some, of the metrics, a fairly substantial, smaller amount of savings from the last
Yep.
quad and the previous quads. Which, on the one hand, is, so I don't know what else
Right.
I don't know what else to propose here.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we are talking about the still same dollar amount being put in the program, but we're now saying we're expecting fewer KWH and BTU savings.
Yeah.
And so we're getting, from that standpoint, getting less for the money.
Yeah.
Which also then, I'm trying to square that with, do we need to continue then? Is this a reshaping? And maybe that's too strong of a word, but, there were proposals last year to double the amount of dollars going into focus, but we're now finding even at the same dollar amount of focus, we're getting less savings. So we are reached a point where we've hit that low-hanging fruit with some of the savings, and that's a big part of some of this.
Right.
Like, we're moving on, and there's gonna be some time to make that up with new programs. But I also think that this is a cautionary move because we are now saying, same dollars, you're gonna get less, it's just like going to the grocery store.
Yeah, yeah.
I go with the same amount of dollars, I get fewer groceries, or I have to pay more. And so, and we're doing that now with Focus. So, I'll join you at alternative one, but I think that we have to be cognizant of this can't be a trend that continues.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great observation, Commissioner, and one of the big items is the LED, right?
Yeah.
Is that for years and years, we've had first CFLs, and it's so easy. You just take out a light bulb and screw in a new one, and just, you can sell them at retail.
Yeah.
And provide an incentive, and now, number one, Wisconsin's done really, really good. We're ahead of the national pace. We've got more LEDs in, but two, the federal standard is coming in that basically says, well, that's all you're
Yeah.
going to be able to put in, and so there's no savings.
Right.
And so that is a huge driver, and we understand that, and I think that's a big reflection of the lower on the electric side. The gas side is, the memos talk about it, the potential study talked about it, where, it's just the avoided cost of that natural gas had been so low. Fracking and shale and all of that had driven the cost of gas low, and we're kind of using that low gas price to set all of this. Well, now, obviously we know that natural gas price has gone up, so how does this change? Again, it's kind of that mid-quad review, or if we do avoided cost review, it may show, wow, the natural gas potential is actually a lot higher than we thought if these natural gas prices stay high. So I don't know what else to do about it either, because this is it was a very rigorous process to get to these numbers, right? We did a really good potential study. We can't just throw that out and say, do more. That's where I landed, is that we can't just say, oh, ignore all of that and set the goal higher. So,
No, and I know,
yeah.
and that's where I kind of,
Right.
it's a struggle,
Yeah,
right?
you
Because.
end up in the same spot, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Okay, so that's that one. We have, the next one is on page 37. So this is related to net savings. So just at the high level, Focus on Energy, does its efforts, does its work. There is what they call an attribution factor, I think is what it's called, that would, it basically kind of weeds out how much customers would have done kind of without the incentive. And the difference between that is the net savings versus the quote, gross savings. Historically, so in Quad 3, and this is consistent with Alt 2, we did not set, the commission did not set a bonus, or performance bonus for the achievement of a net savings goal. It was all based on the gross savings goal. I continue to think that makes sense. That puts the ball in Aptam's court to just get the most savings. There was discussion in the comments as well about the Inflation Reduction Act and those incentives, and sort of there's going to be some sorting out to be done with how is the evaluation going to peel apart those efforts. So I'm coming in at alternative 2, which is to not have a performance bonus, but we still obviously want to track it, and obviously it's going to be evaluated. And so, to me, I was at sub-alt B on this. The memo described how Quad 2's net to gross was 0.7, and so far in Quad 3 it was 0.68. So to me, that seems like what the data is showing us is the net to gross is about 0.7. So that's where I would set it. And so that would put me at Alt 2 and sub-alt B. And I'll pass to you, Chair.
Okay, I can join you there. Alt 2, sub Alt B.
Okay.
Was it 0.7 or 7.5 for the last quad? I can't remember.
So we had set it at 0.75, and I
Yeah.
think that was probably based on quad 1 or quad 2.
Yeah, okay.
And so now that
Okay.
data's just
Yeah.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to having it as a standalone versus, I mean, it can be worked either way. And I'm fine with kind of maintaining the status quo.
Okay.
Where we go. I'll join you at the 0.7. I did want to address, we had a lot, there were some comprehensive comments. You brought up the federal legislation that was passed, the municipalities that sent in the
Right.
comments, commented quite extensively on
Yes.
what we should do, but my feeling is that making any modifications to this program based on that legislation is extremely premature. We can always come back. We don't know. There's no guidance. It might be another year or two before we get guidance on some of these programs and even the exact dollar amounts. So it would be purely speculative and I think potentially quite harmful if we made changes today. Appreciate the comments,
Yeah.
but that's, further down the road and can be addressed at that time. So I'll just add that.
Thank you for that, and I'll join you on that. I thought the comments were really helpful. I think the spirit of their comments is, hey, there's federal money out there, let's get as much into Wisconsin. I support that, but we don't have guidance yet on those programs, so it is a little too early for us to act on that, but I know there are, there's conversations about how do we take advantage and maximize that, so that, I hope that continues. Did you have a further comment, Chair?
nope.
Okay. So then our final decision item was on page 40, and that is, should there be a mid-quad review of goals? I'm at alternative 1, and I would direct staff to do that. Chair?
Yeah, so I was actually at alt 2, and I
Okay.
was just gonna sort of leave it to, I don't know, does it need to be mid-quad? Is it something that the delegated commissioner, what if guidance comes in sooner than mid-quad?
Yep.
And we want to be nimble? And so I was actually at alt 2, where I would not do anything
Wait.
at this point in time.
Okay?
Yeah, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And we always review this stuff anyway. There's always some tweak and modification that's got to be made. So to set a marker out there that's arbitrary, I don't think it's necessary. This can work itself out. So I'm at alternative 2.
Okay. I'll stay where I'm at, but I understand where you're at, so no problem.
Okay.
Overall, do you want to make the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'll move in docket 5FE 104 that we, commission staff, direct and order consistent with our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Excellent.
That brings us to agenda item 15, which is 9300-DR-105. And then also agenda item 16, which is 9300-DR-106. My understanding from the commission legal counsel is that a commissioner wanted this on today's agenda. So I will let either
Yeah.
or both of you
Thank you.
address that.
Yeah, I did ask that it be brought up to the commission for consideration. There was an interlocutory appeal filed by some of the parties in the two proceedings. So I'll address both of them together because the discussion's the same for each. While the time has lapsed for our review, I think it is important for us to still, under our own motion, to bring it back and address the concerns raised by the interveners and the parties here. They have asked for more time. As you guys are aware, this is an extremely complicated docket. While it is an issue we have addressed before, these are still two separate petitions. One is asking for a very different type of rulemaking, essentially, I think, than we have seen before, but it's more comprehensive. And I think it is important for us to make sure that we have a very robust record before us. And I was not, it's okay. I was, the decision date to have this come back to us by December 1st, I don't agree with, because I think that we rarely set out a marker for a docket to come back to us, because stuff happens during a docket, and we don't want to, just like we discussed in the quad, say that it has to happen at a certain time, because dockets can sometimes take a life of their own, or different things come in, and parties are entitled to file motions, and they should. So I think the request from the parties here is very reasonable, and I think it's also necessary for us to have a full record before us. This is also an extremely busy time of year at the commission, and our staff will be working very hard on other dockets and rate cases going out. It is not uncommon for parties to have extensions granted, whether by the ALJ or, as chair, as you sign extensions. There were just a couple signed in the last month on extensions of times for CAs because staff then needed more time, and that was granted. That's a very typical thing to happen, and I think it's necessary. The petitioners in this case filed opposition to that. They'd like this to happen very fast. And they cited, 6, 8 other declaratory ruling cases, which was a nice trip down memory lane, but really has nothing to do with the case before us. Just because it's another declaratory ruling matter doesn't mean that they all have to be handled in the same amount of time. Each case stands on its own, whether it's a DR, a CA, or a CPCN. Again, as I mentioned, there's 18 interveners. There's going to be a lot of motions and briefs filed for all of us to read. So, and again, I just ask again that I think we should send this back to the ALJ and have him set an order that is more reasonable and grants more time for the parties to respond. Because there is no reason why this has to come back to us by December 1st. There's been no reason stated, and until there is, I think that the ALJ should have full discretion with the parties to set a reasonable scheduling matter before us.
Commissioner Huebner?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. I'm at alt 2 for both of them. I would deny the joint petitioner's motion. We talked about this back in July. Less than 20 pages of testimony have been filed. And I don't see any reason to adjust the schedule. I mean, again, we talked about this back in July, and your concerns were noted, Commissioner Nowak. Ultimately, the decision was to advise the ALJ to have something back to us by December 1st, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to make a decision on December 1st. It just means that that something will be available to us by December 1st. So I was at alt 2 for both dockets.
Yeah, I'm going to join you, Chair. I thought the MREA and Vote Solar responses were more compelling. They talked about the schedules for rate cases and other DRs that have been done. From where we sit today, rebuttals due today for one and tomorrow for another, and that's been almost a month since the direct was filed. So, whatever happened up to this point, they've got rebuttal ready today and tomorrow, and then from there on out, the schedule is very consistent with what is done. I mean, the rate cases, I was trying to read the direct, and I saw the sur rebuttal was being filed. That was 2 weeks in between direct, rebuttal, sur rebuttal. So, and there's just a lot of cases that things move, and I think the schedule is okay from here through the end. I also didn't find the environmental review idea to be meritorious. The citations to the docket that literally was about deregulating the entire industry, that was a massive endeavor. What we have before us is, to me, a pretty narrow set of questions. 7 characteristics in one case and 10 characteristics in another. Do those constitute a public utility or not? So I'll join you at alt 2.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just need to add again, I think it's disappointing that we still, and the public hasn't been given an explanation why December 1st it's coming back, and it is temporarily on our long-term calendar to be back at this commission for December 1st. I think we are owed an explanation for that. We haven't been given an explanation for that. The reason you're reading that stuff so quick is because they had to set it there. I mean, it's in there because these parties have been, it's a courtesy. It's a matter of courtesy in courts and in other areas where parties ask for extensions, they're routinely granted. And I don't understand why we're not granting that courtesy here.
They're
So-
also routinely denied.
Well, you granted 2 last month, so, for staff.
No, but in courts, they're
I know.
routinely denied. So it's not that just because you make the request, you're automatically guaranteed the granting of the extension. I mean, we have put deadlines on dockets
We hardly.
before. We did it all through COVID. Where we directed staff that we would like to see information back on this particular docket by a date certain.
Those are not in contested proceedings. This is entirely different apples and oranges comparison. But I understand where you guys are at. I just think the public is owed an explanation of why, and they are not going to get it. So,
You want to make the motion?
Sure. Should I make 2 separate ones, Cindy? Okay. So in docket 9300 DR 105, I move that we deny the request for joint interlocutory review.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
no.
Okay, and in docket 9300 DR 106, I move that we deny the joint petitioner's motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, October 27th, 2022 at 10:30 a.m. For those keeping score, that will be Randy Pilo and Martin Day's last open meeting. So I would encourage you to try to be here in person. There will be cake.
There's
There
free
will be
food,
cake.
people
There
show
will be
up.
cake.
I think that's a
I move we stand adjourned until October 27th.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.